This seat is reserved for our regular. You need to move.
Preferences are one thing, rights are another. Are you sure you belong in first class, ma'am? Yes. My boarding pass says exactly this seat.
Stand up now or step off with us.
This seat compares to itself. It will do.
The air thickened, every eye fixed on her, every breath suspended in waiting. And then came the larger question, rising over the hum of the engines. When power speaks louder than fairness, who decides what justice truly means? The story does not end here. Monica is about to face a bigger challenge. Do you agree with the way Monica acted? Write your thoughts below, and like the channel to spread the message. The late autumn light over San Francisco thinned to a soft gold as boarding wrapped and the last roll of boards clicked into place. In first class, leather, the color of warm sand, and a faint citrus polish gave the cabin a hotel lobby calm. A well-dressed black woman settled into a window seat with the practiced quiet of someone who had flown often and learned to keep her center. She smiled once to herself, a private note tucked away, as if the flight were not only a journey across the country, but also a small experiment whose result she already suspected. She was Monica Harris. The name on her boarding pass matched the name on her license, and both matched the seat displayed above the armrest. A slim black bag slid under the seat in front of her. A wool coat, neat and dark, found its hanger. She thanked the attendant who offered sparkling water, then lifted the glass with a polite nod. A couple near the aisle talked about pies they would bake for Thanksgiving. A man in a navy blazer compared hotel rates in Midtown. A young violinist hummed a few tentative bars into his scarf. It was a kind of pre-holiday flight where strangers grew briefly companionable, and yet something faint and off began to gather the way fog gathers at the mouth of a bay. Linda Cooper moved through the aisle with the clipboard of someone who liked the feel of authority in her hands. She had the courteous voice that never fell but sometimes sharpened on the edges of certain words. Her smile to Monica was professional, at first. "Good afternoon," she said. "Can I see your boarding pass?" The question was normal, the cadence almost musical, but there was an extra beat after the word your, something a little too pointed, the way a finger hovers before it presses a doorbell. Monica turned the small rectangle over and offered it. She did not change her breathing. She did not apologize. "Of course," she said. Linda held the pass an inch too long, then an inch longer, as if a secret watermark might appear if she waited. She returned it with a smile that ended just shy of her eyes. "Thanks," she said in a tone that could mean both thank you and we will see. The seatbelt sign chimed with its modest authority. Overhead, the bin doors clicked shut in a line, left to right, like a row of latches on an old trunk. The captain, a woman with a steady voice and the kind of calm that comes from hours above the weather, announced a slight ground delay while late catering arrived. The air in first class held a sense of citrus polish, and a hint of almond from the small tins warmed for pre-departure. Someone joked about Black Friday traffic on the taxiway, and a few people chuckled. Monica looked out at the long afternoon stretching across the field and then back to the list. She had handwritten in a narrow notebook. Observe service, confirm procedures, note tone. She underlined the last item once. "Are you sure you're in the right section, ma'am?" Linda asked when she returned, voice light, the words arranged like flowers in a vase that still had thorns. Monica angled the boarding pass so the seat number glowed in the soft light. "Yes," she said, even, warm. "I believe I am." The sentence was ordinary, a bridge of air from one shore to another, yet it fell into the aisle as if it weighed more than the metal around them. From the row behind, an older couple coats, folded just so, travel mugs tucked neatly into seat pockets, glanced up. The woman pressed her lips, a small seam of worry. The man tapped the newspaper folded to an editorial about civility in public spaces. They did not speak. A teenager across the aisle, Sophie, holding a paperback with a dog-eared corner, stopped mid-paragraph and glanced between faces, as if trying to learn a language without a dictionary. "May I offer you another drink while we sort this out?" Linda asked, still gentle, as if hospitality could be a velvet robe. Monica set her glass on the tray table, a coaster of condensation forming like a faint ring on the wood desk. "I'm fine for now," she said, and her voice held a softness that did not bend. Linda's smile thinned, then returned to its printed shape. "All right," she said. "I'll be right back." Turn. Oh. In the galley, clatter softened by the curtain, whispers rode the same currents as steam. A second attendant murmured something about seat changes around the holidays, how people double book, how systems misread, how it happens. Linda's reply came in a careful hush, and yet a note of certainty carried through like a tuning fork. Standards. That's all. She smoothed the clipboard with the palm of her hand and checked a small box that was not required for any safety procedure. Outside, a tug rolled past with the slow patience of ground crews who understood that speed and care made different promises. Inside, the violinist tucked his instrument case deeper beneath the seat. The man with hotel rates added a note to his phone about restaurant reservations near the park. The couple traded recipes in soft voices. Monica watched the door that separated the cabin from the jet bridge. The door watched her back. When Linda returned, she folded down slightly. Not enough to be a bow, not enough to be lean, but enough to suggest that closeness might be used like a lever. We're just waiting on one of our regulars, she said. He has a specific seat he prefers. I'm sure you understand. Monica's smile remained. I understand that people have preferences, she said. I also understand what my boarding pass says. The words were simple, made of common material, but they refused to become anything other than what they were. A few rows back, Alicia Brown, a young business traveler with the quick, bright gaze of someone who ran her own calendar, lifted her phone as if to check the time. She did not record anything yet. She did what she always did when the room shifted. She made a small mental map of who spoke, who did not, who held the door, who let it close. The captain's voice returned, reassuring as a familiar hymn. Catering complete. Final paperwork. A short taxi after that. She thanked everyone for patience, the way church ladies thank volunteers, kind, grateful, without a trace of irony. The aisle, for a moment, became only an aisle again. Linda turned to secure the galley and exchange a final phrase with a colleague. Monica adjusted the angle of the shade, halfway down now against the lowering Sunday. She reviewed her list again. Observe, confirm, note, tone. She placed a small dot beside the last word. Holiday travel, right? The man with the hotel list said to no one in particular. You never know what you'll get. The older woman behind Monica answered even more generally, a floating sentence mended from good intentions. People should be kind. That's what matters. Her husband nodded, and the newspaper crinkled like a folded wing. The curtain rustled. Linda reappeared with a smile one might use to correct a stranger's posture. Thank you for your patience, she said, the syllables arranged in perfect order. We may need to reseat you if a conflict arises. Monica studied her face as one might study an instrument panel when the sky looks fine but a small light flashes amber. If there is a true conflict, Monica replied, I'm confident we can resolve it fairly. The sentence landed soft, but it did not move when nudged. The cabin settled into that suspended time between door close and pushback, when everyone belongs to the same held breath. It was days before Thanksgiving, and people wore their best intentions like sweaters they hoped would be warm enough. A service cart sang its tiny wheel song. Overhead vans ticked as the air found its path. Someone laughed 2 rows up, a bright, careless sound, then caught themselves and softened it to a smile. Linda glanced at her clipboard again and, as if adding the last stroke to a signature, made a neat mark in the margin. Her eyes returned to Monica's seat with a look that left nothing to chance. Monica reached for her notebook and capped her pen. A jet on the neighboring taxiway rolled past, its lights winking in gentle sequence like a handful of distant porch lamps. She listened to the changing pitch as ground power relinquished, and the aircraft prepared to make its own electricity. She had crossed this country many times. She had crossed rooms like this far more often. When the chime sounded again, the tone was the same as it had been moments before, yet it felt different, like a refrain that had learned new words. Linda's shoes made precise sounds on the aisle carpet. She paused at the row, gathered her breath into its most courteous shape, and then said nothing at all, letting the quiet speak for her. Monica met that quiet with calm of her own. A pair of almond tins warmed on a small heat pad in the galley. Their sweet scent drifted forward once more, and even that simple comfort could not erase the thin line of the moment. Monica sat upright, her fingers brushing the phone in her bag, her eyes distant as if waiting for something to happen. The door at the front of the first-class cabin eased open with a soft weight of expectation that always follows a delay, and the mood everyone had felt forming in the previous chapter sharpened into focus, as if a lens had finally been brought into clarity. What had begun as a polite doubt now prepared to become a test. Monica Harris remained composed, her posture unhurried, her gaze steady on the small oval of window where late autumn light thinned across the tarmac. Her quiet intention, planted earlier like a seed, kept its promise. She would watch, measure, and stay within herself, no matter what swept through the aisle. The aim of this stretch of the journey was simple in word and difficult in practice. Hold her place with dignity, while the social pressure gathered and let the room show itself honestly. The aircraft around her provided the stage. Inside San Francisco International, the Thanksgiving tide had begun to pull travelers east, and the first-class cabin wore its familiar palette of sand-colored leather and brushed metal. Pre-departure drinks had left small rings of condensation on tray tables. The scent of warm almonds drifted from the galley, and the faint tongue of citrus polish lingered like a careful habit. Evening crept closer. The captain had mentioned a brief hold-up for paperwork, then a short taxi, the kind of pause no one loved and everyone accepted. It was the sort of American holiday flight where strangers talked about pies, hotel rates, and family arrivals, and where the smallest discourtesy could feel like a shout. Into that hush stepped Charles Whitman. His coat was cashmere, the color of storm clouds. His shoes were dark and quiet. His expression carried the impatience of a man who believed punctuality should be arranged for him when he could not arrange it for himself. He surveyed the cabin the way a man measures a room he already owns. His gaze reached Monica's seat and snagged there, and an unguarded disbelief showed for a beat before he dressed it in a smile that said he would be generous if everyone else cooperated. Linda Cooper, clipboard in hand, seemed to expand by half an inch at his arrival, as if a current had moved through the carpet and found the conductor. "Good afternoon, mister." "Whitman," she said, with a warmth that had not been offered so freely a few minutes earlier. "We're just getting settled." He nodded without seeing her. "I use that seat," he said conversationally. But the tone was not a conversation. It was a reminder. "Every time, I am sure that can be fixed." The sentence wore the softness of customer service speech, but its skeleton was harder. "What matters, matters because I expect it." Monica looked up. Her attention did not waver and did not sharpen. It was simply present, the way a lighthouse is present whether waters are smooth or rough. "Good afternoon," she said. "I am seated where my boarding pass indicates." She did not raise her voice. She did not supply a biography to make her place intelligible. She did not offer to compromise her square foot of space in exchange for a drop of peace. Around them, small noises resumed fabric shifting, a magazine page turned the clink of a glass. A teenager across the aisle, Sophie, stopped mid-sentence in her paperback and watched like someone learning a new rule. "We have a regular who prefers that location," Linda offered, turning slightly so that her body was angled toward Whitman, not Monica. "We appreciate flexibility when we can find it." The line was almost gentle, almost. Its message was simple. When the system says certain people are regular, others must be flexible. Monica nodded once to show she had heard. "Preferences are understandable," she said. "So are assignments." The words rested where she said them. Whitman smiled at Linda, a small acknowledgement of shared understanding, and then addressed the air near Monica as if he wanted to trim the sentence of direct address. "Standards matter," he said. "They're the difference between a quiet cabin and chaos." He glanced down the aisle toward the galley as if standards lived there with the cutlery and the coffee service and could be fetched with the right request. The older couple in the row behind Monica traded a brief look. They were the age of silver hair and soft sweaters and long marriages, and they both knew the old feeling of wanting a room to calm down without risking the discomfort of asking it to. Linda's courtesy kept its shape, but a new firmness hid in the corners. "Let me see what I can do," she said. She leaned toward Monica's armrest in a way that implied closeness might encourage cooperation. "Would you be open to a different seat just for today?" Monica's reply carried the ease of a good chair. "I will remain where my ticket places me." There was nothing to argue with in the sentence. Its grammar and its truth were both simple. Sophie's mother placed a steady hand on her daughter's wrist, not to hush her but to anchor her. 2 rows farther up, a man in a navy blazer returned to his list of midtown hotels, but his eyes did not fall quite to the screen. Alicia Brown, who had earlier checked her phone as if to confirm the time, let it rest in her palm, screen off, mind on. She did what she always did when rooms chose sides. She noticed which words were spoken with back straight and which were spoken with shoulders lifted, as if apology were a style. Whitman exhaled through his nose, the restrained version of a scoff. "I have flown this route for years," he said, each word wearing a small accent of importance. "The crew usually understands my needs." Linda nodded as if the point had been proven. "I understand completely," she said, and then to Monica, with the same agreement folded into the syllables, "I can find you something comparable." Monica lowered her gaze to the boarding pass once more, the way a person checks a compass even when the path seems obvious. "This seat is comparable to itself," she said. "It will do." What had been a private friction now had a small audience. The violinist tucked his case more carefully beneath the seat. The older man behind Monica cleared his throat, quiet and unresolved. From the cockpit door came the bright, neutral chime that announces movement and also announces nothing. Somewhere in it, the promise of imminent departure stood beside the hint of further delay. The cabin lights adjusted a fraction, warmer by a shade. Linda straightened. A decision had settled inside her. I am going to take care of this, she said to Whitman, and then to Monica. With professional brightness, we may have to reseat you due to a conflict. Monica's attention softened, not in surrender, but in sorrow, as though she had seen the street before and knew where it ended. If there's a true conflict, she answered, we will resolve it fairly. The line drew a boundary without raising a wall. Whitman shifted his coat on the armrest he had not yet earned. Thank you, he said to Linda, and the gratitude was a coin he expected to spend. He settled into the aisle with the loose comfort of someone who assumed the room would soon be arranged to his shape. People appreciate order, he went on, still addressing the air. That is the reason first class exists. There was nothing abstract about his use of the word people. It included him completely and others selectively. The older woman behind Monica tried kindness as a bridge. Travel brings out the best and the worst, she said, soft enough to be safe. Her husband laid the folded newspaper in his lap and nodded as if to a distant cousin. They wanted the moment to pass without requiring them to be larger than they were. Sophie watched the play of expressions, the way a student tracks a teacher's chalk, learning not only the lesson but the hand that writes it. From the galley curtain, another attendant peered out and then retreated, bringing back a whisper about seat maps and system quirks that happen around holidays. Linda responded with a low phrase that turned on the word standards again, and this time the word carried the weight of a password. She checked her clipboard, and the pen she used made the tiniest sound, a small click that might as well have been an oath. Monica's breathing remained even. She set her glass on the tray, lifted the coaster to wipe the ring, and replaced it with simple care. Her hands did each action as if the world were still orderly and deserved to be treated as such. There was a dignity in that rhythm that could not be borrowed and could not be faked. Alicia noticed it and tucked the detail away in the mental file she kept for moments when a story chooses a spokesperson. Whitman leaned slightly closer, not enough to cross a line, enough to blur it. I am sure you understand how these things work, he said. Loyalty is recognized. Monica met his eyes. I do understand how loyalty works, she replied. That is why I remain loyal to what is right. The sentence did not turn the temperature up. It merely refused to be part of cooling something that should stay warm. For a heartbeat, the two of them occupied the same quiet, each certain that his or her definition of the word right would prevail. Linda broke the tie she believed she was paid to break. I will call someone to assist, she said, and what she meant was obvious even to those who preferred not to know. She lifted a discreet cover near the galley and pressed a button with the practiced ease of someone who could perform the motion in darkness. The room held its breath the way rooms do when a bell is expected. It took only a moment for the soft systems of the airplane to whisper their reply. Somewhere near the forward bulkhead, a panel confirmed the request. Somewhere at the top of the jet bridge, shoes changed direction. Monica folded her hands in her lap and looked once more at the window, where the light had gone from gold to the pale pearl that comes before evening decides what it intends to be. Her calm did not challenge anyone. It simply reminded them of an option. Linda kept her smile. It had become a uniform she put on and could not fully remove. Whitman adjusted his cuff, as if time itself might fit better if the sleeve did. The older couple resumed their quiet conversation about pies. Not because pies mattered more, but because talking about pies was what they knew how to do when the air pressed in. Sophie closed her book on a finger, so she would not lose her place, and for the first time wondered whether the place she might lose was not the page, but the person she wanted to be. At the rear of the cabin, a coach passenger walking forward by mistake was gently guided back by a flight attendant who made the correction feel like hospitality rather than denial. It was a tiny mercy in a room that needed larger ones. Alicia, after one more slow breath, let her phone rest at a different angle on her thigh, screen still dark, as if to test how the act of being ready felt inside her hand. The sound came then, small and bright and official. Exactly the note that says, help is on the way, and also says, help is a matter of definition. The chime rings. A few passengers turn their heads. The air in the cabin grows heavy. The chime's bright note still hung in the air like a small bell in a church when two officers came through the front door, their jackets neat, their expressions arranged for business on a busy day. The moment echoed what had already begun in the previous stretch. Doubt given a voice, preference disguised as policy, and now authority on its way to settle a room that had not learned how to settle itself. Monica Harris kept her posture even, hands folded on the armrest as if they were resting on the porch rail, watching weather rolling from far away. She had set her intention earlier and would not bargain with it now. Hold her place, keep her tone, let the room reveal what it believed. The aim of what came next, though no one announced it, was to push her into moving by making it seem like the only adult thing to do. The aircraft, patient as a courthouse, waited. The captain's earlier update had promised a brief delay for paperwork. The light at San Francisco International had cooled from gold to pearl. The scent of warm almonds softened the galley. First class felt like a waiting room designed by someone who loved pleasant distractions. Holiday voices floated on the air pies, hotel confirmations, reunion traffic, and in that soft tapestry there now ran a darker thread. Mark Johnson introduced himself first, because courtesy was a habit he had kept even on long shifts. His voice was steady, tuned to calm rather than command. Paul Rodriguez stood just behind him, weighing a little too forward on the balls of his feet, eyes moving like a man eager to prove he could carry a situation from one side of a room to the other. Linda Cooper's smile had learned a new firmness. It stayed in place as she turned toward the officers with the relief of someone who believed help had finally arrived in a shape that matched her plan. Near the rear of the cabin, Alicia Brown adjusted her posture so that her phone could be lifted without drama when the time came. For now, she only watched, storing detail. Sophie, the teenager across the aisle, slid a finger between pages to hold her place and, for the first time in her young life, wondered whether the place she might lose was not paper but a piece of herself. "Ma'am," Mark said, and the word held respect rather than distance. "Could we speak with you for a moment?" Monica angled her face toward him. "Of course," she answered, meeting his eyes the way a neighbor meets a knock at a screen door. "What would you like to discuss?" Mark glanced at Linda, who stepped in with a brightness that reached farther than kindness. "This passenger has been disruptive since boarding," she said. The sentence was clean, easy to file, and false. It sounded like a policy manual speaking through a person. Monica did not lift her voice. She did not color it with sarcasm or with ice. "What exactly am I being accused of?" she asked, as if requesting that a ledger be read aloud line by line. A current moved across the nearby rows. The older couple behind her shifted. The husband refolded the opinion page he had been pretending to read. The wife smoothed the hem of her sweater and looked down into her hands. The man with the navy blazer blinked as if the screen of his phone had dimmed. Alicia breathed in, slow and quiet, and let the breath out just as slow, refusing to follow crew instructions. Linda added, each word pronounced as carefully as if it were a dose of medicine and creating a disturbance for other passengers. Paul stepped closer, not close enough to touch, close enough to be felt. "Here's how this goes," he said, voice clipped. "You can move to another seat voluntarily, or you can step off the aircraft with us. Your choice." He had learned the cadence and the posture and the look, the whole kit that made little speeches sound official even when they were not correct. Mark did not echo his partner's threat. He let his gaze find the faces near him, reading them the way a good officer reads a neighborhood at dusk. He saw the older woman who wanted the moment to end without asking her to be brave. He saw the husband whose mouth had formed a familiar line, the line men make when they are doing the math of consequences. He saw the violinist's case peeking from beneath a seat like a folded wing. He saw Alicia's phone face down, her eyes up. Then he looked back to Monica, who had not moved more than a breath. "I showed my boarding pass," Monica said, and the sentence did not argue it logged a fact. She turned the pass again so the inked letters faced Mark. "I am seated where it says I am seated." Linda's smile narrowed in the smallest way, then recovered its width. "We have a regular who requests that location," she explained, low and bright, "and we appreciate flexibility." Whitman, who had been gliding through the moment like a boat piloted by someone else, allowed his voice to join the picture again. "The crew understands my needs," he said, "friendly as a rule. We always work it out. How all? Needs are one thing," Monica answered, "and rights are another." The sentence was gentle enough to sit on a mantel, firm enough to hold up a roof. A flutter passed through the cabin as if someone had opened a door to the evening air. Mark weighed her words, and the weighing showed on his face. Paul did not weigh. He declared, "We are done talking," he said. "Stand up and come with us." He did not bark. He pressed the way a hand on a scale can make the numbers say what the hand prefers. The captain's voice came over the speaker just then, steady as a church elder. "Final paperwork complete. Thank you for your patience. We will be on our way soon." The announcement skimmed over the surface of the scene like a stone over water and then was gone. The engines had not yet started their slow, familiar hum, but the room had already become louder in a way that had nothing to do with sound. "Officer," Monica said to Mark, "if I have violated a rule, please tell me which one and I will address it." She kept her hands visible, and still an old, careful habit learned by people who have had to learn such habits. "The rule," Linda answered for him, "is that passengers follow crew instructions." She placed her palm lightly on the top of Monica's seat back, a performance of closeness that let her voice feel like a favor. "We can make this easy," she suggested. "Another seat is available. Comparable." Monica let a quiet pass through the row so the word comparable could be heard in the shape it wore. "This seat compares to itself," she said at last. "It will do." Whitman shifted beside Linda, loosening his sleeve as if rearranging fabric could reorder fact. He looked around with the air of a man wondering how long a room would take to remember its proper script. The older woman behind Monica found her voice, small but honest. "Kindness goes a long way," she offered into the air. Her husband nodded, and then was still, his eyes not quite meeting anyone else's. Sophie's finger still marked her page like a placeholder for courage she had not learned to use. Paul let his palm fall against his belt. Not a threat, a sound. "Ma'am," he said, "copybook firm, either move seats now or step off with us. We are not going to ask again." The sentence came wrapped in a choice that was not a choice. Mark's jaw tightened, as if he had bitten a seed in a piece of fruit. He said nothing. In the quiet he chose, you could hear his reluctance. Alicia raised her phone a fraction, no more than a person checking the time before a meeting, and set the camera to wait. She did it not to fan flames. She did it because memory needs help when the room begins to deny its own words. The man with the navy blazer pretended to scroll. His thumb did not move. A flight attendant at the curtain peered out and then back, carrying whispers toward the wall where words accumulate when no one in authority wants to hear them. Monica rested her gaze on Linda. It was not a stare, only the kind of steady attention you offer someone when you have decided to stop trying to rescue their performance. Disappointment is the quiet weather. It changes a room without raising its voice. "Is that your final decision?" she asked. The question was for Linda, and also for the room that had allowed Linda to speak for it. Time pressed its hand flat against the cabin, slowing every small motion, an arm pulled into a sweater, a cup set on a tray, a throat cleared but not followed by words. Linda felt the click of her own conclusion, like the closing of a latch she had set herself. She gathered her smile, the version designed for moments when a customer had to be handled, and said the sentence she believed would land her on the right side of company policy, social order, and the favor of a regular who tipped well during the holidays. Yes, Ed Island. The stillness that followed Linda's answer felt like the pause between a struck match and the first hiss of flame. Monica did not flinch. She reached into her bag with a deliberate grace that made time appear too slow, found her phone by touch, and lifted it as if she were about to check the weather. The cabin seemed to lean toward her without moving. The older couple behind her quieted their murmur about pies. The man in the navy blazer forgot his screen entirely. Sophie, the teenager with the paper bag, held her breath and forgot she was holding it. Alicia Brown adjusted her posture by a careful inch, eyes steady, waiting for truth to announce itself. Monica scrolled once, the faint brush of her thumb the only sound she permitted the moment to have, and placed a call. She did not step into the aisle or ask permission. She did not apologize for speaking. She turned slightly toward the window so her voice would carry to the person who needed to hear it and also to the people who needed to witness it. "Please cancel all contracts with Whitman Capital," she said, each word like a letter pressed into soft wax, effective immediately. She listened for a heartbeat and then added, "Schedule an emergency board meeting for Monday. We have personnel issues to address." Her tone was low and unhurried, the tone of someone reserving a table or arranging for flowers, and yet the air in first class changed as if a barometer had dropped. Charles Whitman blinked twice, then lifted his chin with a practiced smile. "That is quite a performance," he said. "I appreciate firmness. It keeps things orderly." His laugh was a gentle clink, designed to guide the room back into his pace. "We can be reasonable," he added to Linda, as if generosity were a resource he alone distributed. Linda's smile, polished to the last syllable, returned at full brightness. "We appreciate your understanding," she told him. And then to Monica, in the tone meant to float above conflict, "Let us keep everything calm. There is no need to escalate." Monica ended the call, set the phone on the tray, and folded her hands. She had given the room one small sentence, and the room now had to decide what to do with it. The hum from the galley, the soft chime of a cart shifting weight, The scent of almonds and citrus those small domestic notes continued, but the music they formed no longer meant what it had meant a minute before. Mark Johnson, the senior officer, felt the tilt of the moment. He did not know the substance yet, but he recognized the tone. A person who asked for nothing she had not earned and would accept nothing less. Paul Rodriguez, younger and less patient, took a step closer. "Ma'am, we are not doing phone calls," he said, as if naming a rule made it universal. "You need to cooperate." The word cooperate wore the color of convenience. Whitman exhaled through his nose. A private punctuation. "This is getting tedious," he said. "Not to anyone and to everyone. Can we move her so we can depart?" He glanced at the bulkhead clock as if a schedule were an argument he could win by pointing at it. The captain's calm voice came overhead, friendly and precise, thanking passengers for patience as final paperwork cleared. She sounded like a person who had guided flights through real weather and did not mistake a room's mood for turbulence. The tone steadied some shoulders. It did not steady all hands. Linda smoothed her clipboard and leaned closer to Monica's armrest, careful not to touch. "Let us not make this more complicated than it needs to be," she said warmly. "There is a comparable seat waiting." Monica did not look at the clipboard or the seat map that was not visible. "The seat I was assigned will be sufficient," she said. The clearness of it made even the intercom seem loud. Alicia lifted her phone a fraction, still not recording. She watched. The older woman behind Monica pressed her lips and released them, as if tasting a word she could not yet say. Sophie's eyes moved between faces, the way a beginner tracks a conductor's hands, searching for a downbeat that makes sense. Whitman tilted his head toward the aisle. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, a question that had worked for him in rooms less well lit. "I have been loyal to this airline for years." "Loyalty counts." Monica met his gaze, not with challenge but with recognition. "Loyalty counts," she agreed. "That is why I will not abandon what is right." The man in the navy blazer slanted his eyes toward the window to hide the fact that he had nodded. "Enough," Paul said, his voice crisping at the edges. "Stand up or step off." Mark felt the word was poorly and stayed silent for another beat, weighing. Linda took the silence as permission. "We will reseat you now," she told Monica, bright as a bell, and gestured toward a row that did not exist on the paper in her hands. Monica reached for her phone again, not as a threat but as an instrument, and placed a second call. She spoke fewer words than before, and they sounded like a key turning. "Confirm cancellation," she said. "Notify legal." She ended the call gently and set the phone down once more. Her hands returned to stillness, and somehow that stillness made more noise than Whitman's patience had. The cabin's small community rearranged itself by inches. The older husband lifted his folded paper and then lowered it again, as if deciding the editorial he had been reading about civility in public life was less hypothetical than he had thought. The wife looked at Monica in a way that reached past manners. The violinist placed his hand on the instrument case at his feet like a small pledge. The man in the blazer remembered, belatedly, that kindness sometimes begins with not looking away. Whitman tried amusement again and found it less cooperative than usual. "This is theater," he said lightly to Linda. "We have all seen it." Linda nodded as if she had. "We will handle it," she promised. "We always do." She glanced toward the forward door, hoping for the presence that settles disputes. The door opened, but it was not the person she imagined who stepped through. It was the person the aircraft itself acknowledged above all others on board. Captain Emily Davis paused on the threshold, as if the deck between cockpit and cabin were a thin bridge at high altitude. She took in the layout of bodies and expressions the way a pilot scans instruments before takeoff. Linda leaning over a seat she did not own, Paul planted at the edge of command, Mark standing solid and unconvinced by the script, Whitman draped in entitlement like a travel blanket, Alicia alert in the posture of witness, Sophie caught between curiosity and courage, the older couple held by long habit, and Monica centered in the December-like calm that patience can earn. Emily knew that air. She had felt it in rooms where someone was being measured by a standard that had nothing to do with skill or grace. "Captain," Linda began, relief coloring the title, "we have a seating issue. I have requested assistance." Emily did not look at the clipboard. She looked at Monica, and the look was not casual. Recognition moved across her face, a flicker that would have been a shout in anyone else. She did not say anything that could be heard by the row, only the quiet intake of breath that happens when a piece of information fits a lock. Paul, mistaking the pause for indecision, stepped into it. "We are removing her," he said. She refused instructions. Mark's jaw changed shape. A subtle protest registered without sound. Whitman, sensing a ship returning to course, offered a benevolent smile. "Thank you, Captain," he said in a voice equal parts praise and expectation. "We appreciate efficient crews." Emily straightened by no more than a finger's width, but the cabin felt it. She approached Monica's row with a steadiness that did not advertise itself. She took in the boarding pass, the posture, the calm that is earned and not rented. Monica met her eyes, and in that meeting, something like relief passed between two people who both knew that some storms must be flown through and some storms must be stopped. Alicia saw that microsecond of recognition and felt the hair on her arms rise, the body's way of detecting weather inside a room. Sophie sat forward until the seatbelt checked her. The older couple leaned in, not to eavesdrop, but because their lives had taught them what happens when a moment might turn and people pretend it is only a moment. Linda gestured again, a small sweep meant to move events along. "Captain, if you could," she began. Emily lifted a hand the slightest bit, not to silence, simply to hold the room in place long enough to speak without being layered over. She took a breath that was not dramatic and not rushed. It was the breath a pilot takes before pushing the throttles forward, fully aware of what the next seconds will require and what they will give. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce." Captain Emily Davis finished the sentence she had begun a heartbeat earlier, her voice steady and low enough to soothe but clear enough to carry, naming Monica Harris and then the truth that redrew every line in the room, the owner and chief executive of this airline. The words did not rush. They arrived like a formal letter slid across a polished table, ending a dispute that had never been fair. The cabin absorbed the news in a silence that felt physical, a small hush, followed by the sound of people remembering their manners. The older couple behind Monica straightened as if out of respect. The man in the navy blazer drew his phone closer to his chest and finally locked the screen. The violinist's hand found his case like a quiet vow. Alicia Brown kept her camera low, but her eyes lifted, holding on to the details a community will need when it tells itself what happened here. Sophie, the teenager who had been saving her page with a finger, released the book and let it close, because she would remember this sentence without ink. Linda Cooper's smile faltered as if a thread had snapped behind it. For a breath, she looked not like an attendant enforcing order, but like a person who had shaved away too much of her certainty and found she could not put it back. She tried again, but the first word came out without air. That cannot be, she's, and the rest of the sentence never arrived. Charles Whitman recovered faster, or thought he did. He adjusted his sleeve and found the warmth he used in boardrooms when the junior associate had missed an email. "Miss Harris, there has been a misunderstanding," he said, as if the word misunderstanding could be used like a towel to blot up a spill. "We value standards. We are on the same side of that." He smoothed his voice with the patient authority of someone who had flown very often and believed loyalty and tipping were synonyms. Monica did not meet the performance with a performance of her own. She stood only the distance required to speak, without raising her tone, and the light through the window made a faint halo along the edge of her coat. "Discrimination has no place on my aircraft," she said, and the sentence felt like a door closing softly on a room that would not be used again. The declaration settled over the carpet, over the aisle, over the clipped metal latches of overhead bins, and the air became simpler. Mark Johnson, the senior officer, let his shoulders ease by a breath. He had not known how the moment would end, but he recognized integrity when it stood up. Paul Rodriguez looked from Captain to Monica to Linda, as if waiting for someone to hand him the script he had assumed he was already reading. Emily did not rush to add anything. She stood a pace back like a pilot, giving an aircraft room to answer its own small noises. And in that quiet, Linda reached for the last tool she thought she had. "Captain, if we could just reseat," she began, but the word just broke on the surface of the new fact and drifted away. The passengers did what Americans do when they realized a rule they accepted was only a habit. Some lowered their eyes, some stared as if to memorize, and some, like the older woman behind Monica, let a small sound of relief escape, the human kind, not the policy kind. Charles tried once more, weaving reason into preference. "If the crew had explained your status, we would not have." And even as he placed the words on the table, he seemed to hear how they sounded, as though dignity were a document that had to be shown before it could be respected. Monica did not argue the logic. She did not list a resume or a balance sheet. She let the quiet ripen and then spoke the only verdict that matched the harm, not to embarrass, but to correct the course of a plane that had drifted. "Linda Cooper, you are relieved of duty effective now." The sentence arrived without thunder, yet chairs seemed to find their own stillness in its wake. Linda's eyes flashed from Monica to Emily, searching for an appeal that no longer existed. Emily held her gaze with the compassion of a leader who has learned hard lessons and expects others to learn them too. Safety and dignity are not optional, the captain said. Not as a flourish, simply as the line that divides what flies and what does not. Linda's fingertips flattened over the clipboard, then slid away. She nodded once, a motion that was both acknowledgement and shock, and stepped back from the row as if the carpet had become unfamiliar under her shoes. The choreography of consequence continued, firm but not cruel. Mark shifted his stance to escort, the way a courthouse officer does when the verdict is read. Paul stood aside, understanding at last that the authority he had tried to borrow had never belonged to him. Around them, the cabin breathed out, a single exhale braided from many different kinds of feeling. Relief, chagrin, a late honesty. Alicia tilted her camera a fraction and caught only hands and hems and the simple weight of a moment when something wrong is named and ends. Sophie's mother squeezed her daughter's fingers once, not to hush but to mark the instant. The way families note a birthday or a graduation, this, too, was a passage. Charles opened his palms as if to show he had nothing up his sleeves and found the gesture did not help. "Miss Harris," he said, softer now, and in his voice the shape of apology could be seen at a distance. "I regret any offense caused. It was never my intent." The older man behind Monica looked down at the editorial he had been carrying and understood it differently. The violinist, without lifting the case, imagined a slow, low note, the kind orchestras use to tune the room to the truth. The man in the navy blazer cleared his throat, found no words, and settled for meeting Alicia's eye with a rueful nod that admitted what they both knew. Many had watched, few had helped. Monica did not dwell there. She turned the room forward, the way a good pilot points the nose to clean air. She spoke very little and very clearly about what would happen next. Documentation, training, the expectation that dignity was not a privilege purchased with miles, but a baseline owed to every passenger in every seat. No one interrupted. She did not scold. She reset the altitude of the day. Emily stepped in when the sentence required rank, backing the decisions not as favors but as procedures. A small courtesy passed through the crew like a current, lights dimming and returning as if the aircraft itself had nodded. The older woman behind Monica whispered, "Thank you," not because she hoped to be heard, but because gratitude has its own gravity and needs to be placed. Mark inclined his head, a professional acknowledgement tempered by personal relief. Paul studied his shoes and learned something he should have learned earlier. The hum of the galley returned to its domestic key. The scent of almonds and citrus resumed its ordinary place in the air. The pre-holiday chatter dared, by degrees, to begin again. The lesson did not spoil the evening. It cleared it. People lifted their cups and remembered how to be kind. In the window beside Monica, the fading light over the field gentled from pearl toward a warmer gray, and the wing waited with patient certainty for the pushback that would come when all the right work had been done. Monica allowed the quiet to stand for a breath, then turned her face toward the aisle, not to the past, but to what remained incomplete. "And as for you, Mr. Whitman, one by one, the consequences fell into place, with the calm inevitability of checklists completed in the right order." Monica Harris did not raise her voice or hurry her steps. She spoke with the same measured care a pilot gives to a pre-flight brief. She affirmed the facts already laid before the cabin and then set out what followed, not as spectacle, but as procedure. Linda Cooper was relieved of duty and would be escorted from the aircraft at the earliest safe opportunity. Paul Rodriguez, who had pressed where he should have paused, would be removed from the flight and reviewed for a cause. Mark Johnson was thanked for his restraint and asked to help ensure the transition remained orderly. None of this was said to humiliate. It was said the way a good leader says what must be said when the temperature of a room needs to be reset to humans. The aim of this final stretch was simple: restore dignity, complete the journey, and ensure that what had been learned here did not evaporate like breath on a window. The aircraft, which had felt for so long like a stage borrowed by a harsher play, returned to itself. The galley resumed its small, comforting hum. The scent of almonds and citrus slipped back into the air. Glasses were lifted and set down without tremor. In the rows behind Monica, the older couple sat a little straighter, as if to match the tone. The woman whispered thank you into the space between their seats, not to be heard, but because gratitude is a kind of order. Her husband folded the editorial he had carried all afternoon and looked at it as if the words had been revised while he was away. Captain Emily Davis backed Monica's decisions with the quiet authority of a commander who understands that safety is not only mechanical but moral. She adjusted the plan with ground control and returned with a timeline whose edges were already smoothing. Linda stood to the side, clipboard at her thigh, and looked at the carpet as if it had new patterns she did not recognize. When Emily nodded to the senior officer, Linda moved toward the forward door with the dignity that remains available even on a difficult day, and Mark walked beside her at the decent pace of a professional. Paul followed a step later, eyes lowered, learning the part of the lesson that had finally reached him. The small community of first class, having watched a line be drawn and then honored, let out a softened breath. A violin case shifted under its owner's careful foot. The man in the navy blazer, who had earlier pretended to read, closed his eyes for a moment and opened them with a different expression, the kind that meets a witness across a room and amidst a debt. Sophie, the teenager who had been holding her place, with a finger slid the bookmark in properly and sat forward as if a quiet answer had been given to a question she had not known how to ask. Alicia Brown, who had kept her camera low until documentation mattered, now recorded a few seconds of the cabin at rest. The captain's steady posture, the officer's measured steps, the small circle of calm around Monica. She was careful about faces. She understood the difference between a record kept and a spectacle made. When she lowered the phone, she found Monica's eyes. There was no triumph there. There was clarity. Alicia nodded once, and Monica returned the nod with the smallest curve of a smile that said, "Use what is true and do it well." The aircraft pushed back from the gate. The chocks were cleared, the tug rolled away, and the wing lights traced their patient sequence. The captain's voice returned to thank everyone for patience. Her tone carried the low, reliable music of someone who has flown through worse weather than this and knows how to find the smoother layer. Taxi felt like a reset walk after a hard talk. When the engine spooled and the runway opened ahead, the room's last rattled, edges settled, the nose lifted, the ground fell away. City blocks of late autumn light arranged themselves beneath the climb, and the aircraft found its line east. At a cruising altitude, kindness returned in practical shapes. An attendant new to the front of the cabin after the reshuffle poured sparkling water with a care that honored the glass. People spoke in voices appropriate to being close to other people. The older man asked his wife if they had enough cinnamon at home for pies. She said she would check the pantry and smiled as if a small thing had been rescued. The violinist unsnapped the case just enough to confirm the instrument's neck was secure. The man in the blazer caught Alicia's eye again and offered a soft apology that did not ask to be absolved. She received it without ceremony. It was enough. Emily visited Monica's row once the seatbelt sign had been off for a while. She did not stand over her. She matched her level, hands loosely folded, pilot's watch catching a thin thread of cabin light. "Thank you," she said, and left unsaid the catalog of rooms where thanks like that had not been possible. Monica answered with the clarity that had carried the day. "This is not about winning," she said. "It is about flying right." Emily's mouth tipped in the fraction of a smile, the kind the commander allows when the phrase deserves to be kept. "We will get better," she said. "We will write it down and do it as if our license depends on it, because it does." The exchange was brief. It was also the hinge on which the rest would turn. Hours slid by in the measured comfort of a cross-country route. Dinners were served without fuss. Cups were refilled with the natural rhythm of service done well. A few passengers slept, a few read, a few looked at the dark wing with its steady jewel of light and felt steadier themselves. Alicia opened her laptop and began a simple note file, outlining times and phrases while the memory was still precise. She did not sensationalize. She wrote what was said, by whom, and in what order. She wrote how the cabin changed temperature when a single sentence was spoken. She wrote how a teenager sat forward and an older couple rethought an editorial. She wrote that kindness left and returned. She wrote that a captain stood where she was needed. When the cabin lights dimmed for night, Monica took a breath that belonged to no one else and allowed her eyes to close for a while. Her calm was not a performance. It was the practiced quiet of a person who has spent years replacing heat with light. Sleep came, not deep but clean. She woke to the faint clatter of breakfast service, the soft rustle of people returning to themselves. Outside, the eastern sky lifted from black to slate to the fragile silver that makes the edges of clouds look embroidered. The aircraft descended. The small changes of pressure made ears pop and then clear. The city spread ahead in its precise geometry of lights and river, and the runway reached up the way a promise keeps its shape when the clock runs out. On final approach, Emily's voice carried that steady hush pilots use when they are very busy and very calm. She gave the weather in words rather than digits. Cool air, a light crosswind, good visibility. The gear came down and locked with a comfortingly mechanical sound everyone recognizes whether or not they can name it. Touchdown was firm in the way a correct landing is firm. Reverse thrust spoke, then faded. The aircraft slowed, turned from runway to taxiway, and the cabin lifted into the soft talk people do when they know they're almost where they meant to be. At the gate, the seatbelt sign chimed, and bodies did the choreography of arrival bags from overheads. Codes shaken out, phones awakened, not for drama but for logistics. Monica remained seated through the first rush, not from horror but from habit. Let those who need to hurry, hurry. Alicia waited too, and when the aisle cleared, she stepped forward. Miss Harris, she said, careful and plain. I recorded parts of what happened. I can share it if you want it for documentation. Monica studied her for a heartbeat and saw the steadiness behind the offer. Use your judgment, she replied. Tell the truth in a way that helps. Alicia nodded. I will, she said. And both women understood that the work now belonged both inside and beyond the aircraft. Emily met them at the forward door as the last passengers filed past. We would debrief, she said to Monica, and we would change what needs changing. Monica answered with the same sentence she would use in rooms with larger tables and brighter lights. Start with training, she said. Add accountability. Write procedures that do not bend with tips or titles. Emily inclined her head, a promise sealed without flourish. Mark, standing discreetly to the side, offered a quiet farewell and the professional sadness that comes when a colleague's day has ended badly and rightly at once. The jet bridge breathed its cool, steady air into the doorway. People said their ordinary goodbyes and moved toward the lives waiting for them. The older couple stepped into the tunnel hand in hand. The man in the navy blazer paused to tell a gate agent that the captain had handled a difficult situation with grace. Sophie emerged with her mother, cheeks bright, clutching her paper bag as if a different kind of story had been placed inside it. Alicia walked toward the terminal with purpose, the way a courier walks when the package is not fragile but important. Monica entered the concourse in no particular rush. The smell of coffee and pretzels, the scaffolding of announcements, the river of travelers weaving without colliding all of it, returned the day to its ordinary music. She did not look for attention. She did not avoid it. She moved toward the quiet places where phones work and people do not bump into one another, ready to answer the messages that had surely multiplied while the aircraft crossed the middle of the country. Screens above the moving walkway glowed with morning news. At first, there were only weather maps and sports scores and cheerful anchors practicing their brightness. Then, a red banner ribbon across the bottom row, and the producer somewhere chose a phrase that would catch without cutting. From the corner of her eye, Alicia saw the cardon bloom and lifted her phone, not to film, but to confirm that truth sometimes travels quickly when given a clean road. When the plane lands, the airport television screen shows breaking news. Viral video sparks national conversation on discrimination in air travel. In the hush that followed the long journey, what lingered was not the clash of voices, but the quiet dignity of a woman who chose steadiness when others chose pride. Passengers who had looked away now carried with them the memory of how a single truth, spoken gently yet firmly, could reset the course of an entire room. From such moments, we learn that justice is not always loud. It is often the calm insistence that every life deserves equal ground and every seat equal respect. Like a lamp left glowing in the farmhouse window on a winter night, a small act of courage can guide weary travelers toward shelter and remind them they are not alone. So take a breath, recall the quiet strength that surrounds us in family, friends, and neighbors. And if this story has touched you, consider passing its warmth to someone who may be waiting in the dark.